Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, of a very special guest. He's publishing a book next week. Today is March 13th, 2026. If you're watching this on my three YouTube channels, X, Rumble, Rockfin, you will see the title of his new book. And the full title is The Coming Food Crisis: How Corporations, Activists, and Climate Alarmists Are Waging War on Farmers. It's John Klar, Klar. And if you see the title, is a foreword by Joel Salatin, who I had his co-host on a podcast a couple weeks ago. She also wrote a blurb for this book. Her name is Sina McCullough, and she wrote Hands Off My Food. So keeping in line with this very important, very timely topic of really food sourcing, food quality, and like the over-industrialization, centralization of one more thing in our whole world, which goes into healthcare and all this stuff, but energy. But this is food, which has really changed. I read the intro, I scanned through the book, and I think one of the themes in the book is how much things have changed, really, maybe even in one generation or two generations of food sourcing and our lives, and this kind of urbanization. And like I said, this like agribusiness centralized themes. I think that agribusiness is centralized. I grew up in Nebraska, where like I think it was ConAgra was like the big one, but it's like these international conglomerates are making our food, which is really scary. And Gates is involved in all that stuff. But he has a very interesting background. He's in Vermont right now, and he can talk more about his book, which is coming out next week. I saw it on Amazon. It'll be available on as a Kindle audiobook and as a hardcover. And I'll put a link to his active Substack, which is Small Farm Republic, or his full name on Substack, at John Klar. So he has a lot of followers there and posts a lot there as well. But again, we're going to talk about this book that he's publishing next week, The Coming Food Crisis, and the author again is John Klar. So John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
For people who haven't heard your name or maybe not familiar with you, this is, you said, is your third book. You have another fourth book coming out in 2026. Full title of that is Welcome to the Revolution. Maybe you can talk about your background and your connection to the food that we eat and the coming food crisis.
Well, my background right now is a pretty fancy looking residence that I want everybody to know isn't mine. I don't live like that. I'm in an 1852 farmhouse on top of a mountain in Vermont, where actually my family on my mom's side have been since about 1798. And in fact, that's how I know the age of this house, because the family that built this house, the Trask family, are in-laws of mine. Because up here, everybody kind of, you didn't go far to find your beloved, maybe the corn husk. And I actually grew up hunting woodchucks in these fields. I'm still surrounded by my cousins, my great-great-great-grandfather, great-great-great-great-grandfather, and everybody in between are buried a short walk from here. And that attachment, that foundation, is pretty rare in America today, and even in Europe and other parts, where people have become alienated and separated. And I grew up just loving Vermont, but I didn't plan to live here. Our grandmother used to tell us, get out of Vermont if you ever want to make a living. So I did, and I grew up in Connecticut. I graduated UConn, University of Connecticut, and then UConn Law School. And I actually then moved to the United Kingdom, where I was a corporate tax attorney for what's now PricewaterhouseCoopers. And then when I came home to Connecticut, we moved back here, and I hung out my shingle for a number of years. I practiced law as a litigator, particularly as a special public defender and criminal defense attorney, and worse, family law attorney. And then I got sick. This was almost 30 years ago now. I got really sick, and I had been very healthy. I hadn't been to a doctor in over a decade. Turned out it was Lyme disease, but by the time we figured it out, I could barely walk. I had to close my practice, sell the building I owned. My business was booming. And so we moved to the northeast corner of Vermont. We didn't want our kids to get bitten by ticks and get sickened. And we bought a dairy farm and started farming. And so that was an unexpected transition. But in the process, we started realizing that the food was so much tastier and better. And I learned as a farmer, I was just trying to eke by, that the deck was stacked against me. That, why was it so impossible to make a living farming? And why were there so many regulations to make it so difficult to do something as fundamental as grow food. And I built myself an artisanal milking parlor and cheese making facility. And then we since downsized, partly because my health didn't improve, but it has got better when I gave up antibiotics and worked more on lifestyle changes, better sleep, more water, and better food. I have fibromyalgia syndrome, which is extremely rare in men and quite common in women, sadly. So I count myself sort of a spokesman for them. And so I continue to be very sensitive to things like processed foods and carbohydrates in general, but especially refined carbohydrates. I love potatoes and bread, but I have to avoid them because there's a direct correlation between that and the inflammation that I experience. And so I throw that out there more as a shout out as an advocate for people that struggle with this illness. But so with those two perhaps disparate disciplines coming together, I've realized that I have a special role to play in explaining the food supply and the regulatory structure and even tax and subsidy policies that favor large industrial food producers and push out small farmers. And the small farmers are where we find a lot of the quality organic food, the local food, instead of shipping it from California to Vermont, like much of our food comes from. But I've watched this very community here in Vermont. Sort of the farms have disappeared. There were about 27,000 dairy farms in Vermont in 1929. There are now about 500, mostly consolidated. And with that, and this is Wendell Berry 101, for those who know Wendell Berry, he's a writer from Kentucky. His seminal book was The Unsettling of America. And as the farmers moved out of the countryside and consolidated into the city, we have rural decay and poverty, because when you lose the farmers, you lose the grain dealer, you lose the equipment dealer, you lose the veterinarians, you lose the carpenters that work on your barns. And in Vermont, this landscape, more and more, the farmland is growing up in trees, and we're replacing our local food production with far away shipping and fragile supply lines. There's a huge vulnerability there. It's also not really good for the environment, if that's your concern, to truck food 3,500 miles. No society in the history of the world has become so dependent on technology and so separated from their food supply. I do apologize for my border collie puppy. He's playing with his mom. And so I feel a real duty to my children and grandchildren and everybody's children and grandchildren to warn them that we can lament the loss of our farms while we do nothing and then pay the price, or we can start to recruit young people and reverse what we've done. This is really by design, as I document in the book, and we could even get into the huge conspiracy of globalists trying to control the food supply. And I'll make the case as a lawyer right here. And I am the Lorax, and I speak for the cows. They are not climate culprits. They are saviors. Cows rebuild soils, and they convert solar panels called grass into food we can eat without anything in between to profit from us and enslave us. And that is the intro I just made up for you, Bill. I hope it's okay.
I like it. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like there really is some kind of, it seems like it's not just an attack, but it's like a wanting to change the culture and move away. And maybe there was a draw of urbanization at the time, but it seems like that's kind of flipping in a way. I feel like my social circle, everybody's thinking about getting back to the land or something, but it wasn't to our benefit. So you lose that whole culture, just like you said at the intro. The people who work on the barn, the craftsmen, all that stuff gets centralized, and also the food quality decays, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe we can expand on that. Yeah, like the food quality is really different, right?
Well, you've raised a couple issues there. Compound question, counselor. But that's okay. I'll take it and run with it if that's okay. That's not a criticism. Yes, there's a back to the land desire. I think it's different. In the 70s, many people moved to the land because there was an oil crisis. And as soon as the oil crisis ended, people moved back to the cities. We started being more efficient in saving fuel. As soon as the oil crisis ended, we went back to muscle cars. We didn't learn. This seems different. This is more, I think, more of an awareness deep down inside for many people that living in an urban, congested, alienated mecca, which has its benefits. I mean, if I want to go to the ballet, I'm going to go to the city. But people, especially young people, sense that something that they've lost community, they've lost simplicity, they've lost fresh air and fresh water. COVID showed us both the threat to our food supply and the dangers of living in cities, perhaps, and also, again, a yearning for the countryside. But it's expensive. And how are we supposed to do this? In the next 15 years, we're expected to witness a transfer of about 50% of all U.S. farmland, which continues to shrink. Farms continue to shut down. So how do we reclaim our food supply when we are importing more and more of our foods from places like China, which are often highly processed, and that also creates vulnerabilities, and that comes to the food point. And also, I would just make a little parallel of a physiological connection to what we're talking about, which might be economic and social and spiritual about urban versus rural. And the country mouse and the city mouse have always got along well, by the way, but they're in a little tension now. And what I was going to share is that we are starting to realize that we have been treating our food and our bodies and our system as if there's some kind of commodity that we should make as cheaply as possible, like a widget or a car, and that they don't scale well. And we've learned that feeding plants chemicals to make more abundant food in the short term, but long term destroys the soil and our water supplies and our bodies and our own gut microbiomes. We're starting to learn a little humility about this, that actually we've been taught to be terrified of germs, but without the 99% of beneficial bacteria to digest our food and actually give us immunity and other function, then we perish. And so the healthiest microbiomes in the world, studies show, are in the people that live in the Amazonian rainforest. And the most unhealthy human microbiomes in the world are found in people that live in dense urban areas. So being connected to the soil is a natural part of human existence. So it only makes sense that people would start to perhaps perceive that something is wrong in Denmark. Now, in the meantime, and this speaks to the issue of food quality, the Green Revolution, that name, post-World War II, new technologies, new herbicides, new pesticides, we can increase yields. Isn't it magical? We have synthetic fertilizers made from natural gas, also known as methane. We're told methane is very bad, but if you replace cow manure as a fertilizer with synthetic fertilizers, you're using methane without rebuilding the soil. You're killing the soil. But, we can say that whether it's, as an attorney, I don't want to set myself up, Bill, you can understand this, in front of a judge or a jury for a harder mountain to climb than I have to. So do I have to prove that it's by design that monopolies have formed around our food supply and the inputs for farming? Or can I just say that it's natural market forces? That is, corporations want to increase market share, they want to eliminate their competition, and they want to maximize profits. And that is a dangerous prescription if it means losing the non-monetary attributes of things like human health, rural communities. The markets don't care, unregulated markets. But what we've seen is a consolidation. And now we have at the WEF seated some of the largest multinational corporations in the world, about 8 of whom control something like 70 or 80% of our food supplies. We also have insurance companies and oil companies and I think BlackRock, and they're making decisions about the future of agriculture. And they're saying through the WEF and the United Nations and Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab that we must consolidate all agriculture into the GMO model because that's more productive per acre than peasant farmers, of which there are still 400 million or so around the world, in order to protect ourselves from carbon dioxide. And I could trace for you back actually to the Kissinger report of 1974 about how this is just a long-term plan to dominate humanity for whether for profit or for domination. Control the food, control the people. And if you control the farmers, you control the food. So you lead me if you'd like. I see we have some questions. I'm going to put on my +2s.
Corporations like Captured Market says, would you? Yeah. But that Kissinger report's really important because they really keyed into controlling food, right? And he's a member of the Trilateral Commission and every other kind of sinister organization out there. But that was it. And also, he's kind of like a depopulationalist too. Like I think so.
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what if it's is it okay if I take our listeners
Of
and viewers
course,
through
of
that?
course.
All right.
Feel
So
free.
1974, I was a youngin. Henry Kissinger was kind of a creeper. Yeah, I see that about Colorado, the water problem. Absolutely going to destroy our aquifers. We need winter snowfall as well. We have a dearth of snow this winter in the Sierra Nevadas, the Ogallala aquifer. I'm responding to the comment here. We'll come back to that. So 1974, Henry Kissinger is going to save the world by reducing population. So the Kissinger report, which people need to understand the context, this was authorized by Richard Nixon. It was secret. It was not even disclosed for, I think, decades. And only in 2004, I believe, did we find a memo that showed that the original authorization for that equipped Henry Kissinger to work in tandem with the CIA, the USDA, the State Department, and an organization called USAID. Imagine that. And the goal was, if you really pick through it, it's a lengthy, very comprehensive document created with all those agencies. The central premise is that it was an issue of national security to prevent overpopulation around the world. Aldous Huxley actually wrote about this threat in his book, Brave New World Revisited, which is a nonfiction book. And so much of the world, I mean, there really were genuine concerns about overpopulation. But woven throughout that, if you really look at the real pretense or foundation of this is why? Why is this a national security issue? Well, bottom line, if American industries lose access to the natural resources of third world countries because they're disrupted by their rampant breeding patterns, then that could hurt us economically. That's the pretense. And so Kissinger actually even posited in the report how we could withhold food aid in exchange for these third world nations implementing birth control, in particular, fertility control methods. And it's really kind of a creepy document if you read it. One of the things it says is that we have to protect food supplies to prevent world hunger. He talks actually about the potential toxicity of industrial farming methods, and this is before GMO cropping and glyphosate and this whole brave new world of farming. But he says we have to control food because science shows that the climate is changing and that it's getting colder and that crops are going to freeze earlier and earlier in the fall. And so we're going to, they switched that narrative. The whole thing is built on this idea that we have to protect the world's population by controlling food supplies. But really, the national interest is to protect industry. And the way you do that is to stop people in third world countries from reproducing. And in it, he has a plan to use global supranational organizations like the UN to give them more power and to equip NGOs, non-governmental organizations, to be partners in educating people about the importance of birth control. And those are the organizations we see now that have ascended to be in dominant positions, where you have people like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and John Kerry expounding upon the evils of the gentle cow and why they need to have a factory food made of plants to replace them to protect protect us from methane and greenhouse gases. It's a demonstrable lie, and I can prove it in about 3 minutes. And if my cows were here, they would speak for themselves, but I must speak for the cows.
It is a lie. It is a lie. But they're probably eating this. This is an intentional thing for the rest of us, the hoi polloi, not them. They probably eat better than anything. If you look at some of these guys, they all have private chefs, organic food, stuff like that. Thanks for all the comments, guys. I'm trying to keep up with them. But
yeah, sorry, I'm not very good. You can lead us.
It's all right. I'm trying to keep up. Yeah. They're talking a lot. The globe. This is my story. Says the globalists have changed our food supply to help change our bodies for their transhumanist. It seems like it. Like one of the weird things is like when I was growing up, everybody was kind of skinny. So I think that there's something in the food that's making people having a harder time to lose weight, and it's something about the processing or something. I don't know, but I
could speak to that.
Please do.
So it's actually, when we look, for instance, at autism, things are never so simple. It may be vaccines, but it could be toxins. We have a lot of them. We create about 3,000 new chemicals a year. We have over 100,000 man-made chemicals. We're worried about invisible diseases, but we're not seeing the invisible chemicals. They're in our water. They're in our bodies. We now know microplastics are accumulating in our heart, in our lungs, in our reproductive systems, in our brains. You may have read, they estimate a person my age has probably about the equivalent of a plastic spoon in our brain. Oh, that may cause Alzheimer's. What a shocker. So all of these contaminants, when they are studied at all, are studied in isolation. Nobody's studying what happens to you when you have a potion of 40 different chemicals in your cookie, or in 50 different additives in a Chick-fil-A sandwich. And so some of these additives are created, there's nothing corporations like more than market consolidation. They like something else even more. If they can take a waste product that is a liability that they have to pay to dispose of and turn it into something they can sell, like that they can make you eat, well, that's a win-win, right? You've reduced your overheads. You've actually turned it into a positive cash flow. Well, that's the case with probably high fructose corn syrup, but certainly with hydrogenated fat. Remember when we were told that butter was bad and we should eat parquet? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature. Well, they fooled us into thinking that Mother Nature was wrong. Butter's very good for you. Margarine's not. The red meat is very good for you. The fake meats are not. Fake meats, plant-based meats that are made from GMO crops, contain all of the pesticide residues and other chemicals that we're accumulating in our bodies. Forever chemicals mean, and there are many of them, there are over, I think, 12,000 PFAs now identified by the EPA, but there are probably more. These are chemicals that can stay in your body throughout your life. They accumulate like mercury. Children's bodies and women are particularly vulnerable because they're developing, and in women's case, they have more sensitive reproductive systems. And they stay in the environment for maybe thousands of years, depending on what they are. That's why they call them forever chemicals. Oh, but the carbon dioxide. This country, we used to agree that toxins were bad, and we had bipartisan agreement. That's something Nixon started the EPA. And then we suddenly got into this, the globe is warming. It's an inconvenient truth. Let's forget about all those chemicals and those ecotoxins. Let's focus on greenhouse gases, and let's spew all kinds of chemicals in renewable manufacturing to go after net carbon. We're not net toxins. We're actually looking the other way with lithium mining, with 30 to 40% more tire dust is generated from EV cars because of their weight and their torque. Well, that's 70% of the microplastics in the ocean that are ending up in your fish. If you study it, they're saying don't eat ocean fish anymore. It's full of microplastics. It's landing on the top of the Alps. Oh, those wind turbines, well, they're made from fiberglass. How are you going to get rid of them? What was created for toxins in their manufacture? This is, by the way, Wendell Berry 101 again, externalized costs. So when you start putting these additives, because there are more additives, there are sweeteners, there are salt, and they're not always the best form of preservatives, right? Artificial flavorings, things to make you keep eating something that's made out of a substrate of like soy and corn and isn't really food at all and is nutritionally depleted. If they're going to get you to eat it, they're going to spray stuff on it. Here, as a farmer, I don't do it, but I have a jug of molasses handy. Sometimes farmers, especially in dairy, raising animals, if you have poor grade hay and the cows won't eat it, you spray it with a mixture of molasses and water and the cows will eat it. Well, that's what they do to us. They're treating us like CAFO animals. And I think that's maybe on your end. I hope you're okay. It sounds like you got emergency people coming.
I'm just close to a very busy street. Sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. I'm making light. Now, there's a book called Hooked by Michael Moss, where he documents how they have whole laboratories, kind of like in the tobacco industry once upon a time, creating chemicals to make you keep eating when you're already sated, right? Creating, again, chemicals to shut down, in this case, your natural body system. Now, what Ozempic and Wegovy do is they turn that back off. So if you look at like Bayer Monsanto, this is a company that creates GMO seeds, which are genetically modified for one purpose, which is to be resistant to Roundup, which is glyphosate, right? And so you spray the corn, let's say it's GMO corn, you start your corn, you plant it, the weeds start coming up too, but instead of weeding it, you go through and you spray it all with glyphosate, and it kills everything but the corn, because the corn, only this kind of corn, it would kill heirloom or traditional or organic corn. This kind of corn doesn't die when you spray the chemicals. And that is a pretty marvelous technology. But what we found is that, maybe the glyphosate isn't good for the soil microbes, and maybe it isn't good for you. And then for many crops, just before harvest, particularly with wheat, they will spray them with glyphosate. They're not GMO crops. They spray them with the glyphosate to kill them all uniformly, to increase yields and make them prepared for the combines. And that's called a pre-harvest desiccant. Well, when you spray it 3 days before harvest, that's why it's in your Cheerios. That's why it's in your children's cereal. That's why it's in women's breast milk. So if a company like Bayer Monsanto can sell you the chemicals, they can sell you all kinds of nasty pesticides. Oh, wait, they're a pharmaceutical company too. So after you get cancer, they're going to sell you the cure. And so that is a racket and a consolidation, and it should give people concern, because it really is out of a Huxley kind of novel. It's dystopian. And that's where we live today. And we have to look it in the eye. We have to start reading our labels, especially young people, Gen Z and millennials. They're reading their labels. They're eating red meat. That's why the price of burger is up, because people recognize, particularly grass-fed meat, if it's legitimate, is healthier. It's got good fats in it. It's got more iron and nutrients and antioxidants. The animals are generally treated better as well, which is popular. But no more of this eggs are bad. Remember, eggs are bad? I just kept eating eggs. I had 4 this morning from my chickens, organic grain. And so the way to combat this is to stop buying their stuff. 60% of the food in grocery stores are ultra processed. They have very little nutritional value. And when you add all of these things up, that's why we have an obesity and diabetes epidemic in the last few decades. Captain Crunch with Crunch Berries is not good for you. Tricks are not for kids. There was a study, I think it was actually a presentation before Congress in the 50s, where somebody showed that if you fed rats a diet of cardboard, that they would grow faster than if you fed them a diet of cornflakes. I beg your pardon, cardboard sprayed with multivitamins. So the response was to spray the cornflakes with multivitamins. Remember, you see on the box, fortified with 8 essential vitamins that your body's probably not absorbing anyway. It's all a marketing scam, and it appeals to things, ultimately, one of our most fundamental natural instincts, which is taste. So now they've got you trapped. And so, yeah, we are getting sick. These foods cause children to have anxiety and depression. Oh, let's give them some SSRIs. They need some Ritalin. You take a lot of these kids and you just give them wholesome food, and you've cured the problem. We can cure type 2 diabetes for most people right now just by changing their diet and increasing their exercise level, because we should point out the other thing with modern society is we're very sedentary. And so that's not good. Your body's not made to not move, and everything atrophies. Exercise brings blood to the brain. It's good for brain function. It's good for everything else. So those 2 factors, poor diet and poor exercise, and this is what Bobby Kennedy and Maha talk about, are why we're sick. And when you go to Europe, you don't see as much obesity, let alone when you go to Japan. I taught a class in agriculture to middle school kids one day, and I made some comment about, we don't want to be fat phobic. And they said, well, Mr. Klar, what's that? I said, you don't know what fat phobic is? I said, Cheryl, look it up on your computer. They had their laptops. And she read, fat phobic means, an irrational fear of people that are overweight, something like that. And I said, Cheryl, are you fat phobic, or do you just not want to be heavy? I said, Gerald, look up the obesity rate in America. What is it? And he looks it up. He's like, oh, Mr. Klar, it's 58% or something like that, whatever it was at the time. And I said, okay, Stephen, look up, what is the obesity rate in Japan? 3.9%. Do you think it's because the Japanese are fat phobic? I asked them, right? Just simple logic here. Look at the dietary differences and what people value in those 2 cultures right there, because it's cultural. It's not racist. Japanese aren't thinner because if they ate the garbage we're eating, they would be plump too. They'd all be sumos. right? They'd all be sumo wrestlers. We're the society of sumos. We're the fattest, sickest society in the world with the highest healthcare costs and the most wealth. So apparently, I guess you do get what you pay for, because for 40 years, the average U.S. Household's budget for food was about 9% of their annual budget. It went up to about 12% during COVID and the Inflation Reduction Act and the massive infusion of money into our money supply, which created the inflation. But now we are tasked with trying to improve food supplies while keeping food prices low, because people are spoiled, but they've been getting what they've been paid for. I drink raw milk every day. So at any rate, and meanwhile, in the name of safety, this really started with Jack in the Box. We have to control all the food processing because we don't want you getting sick from a sick cow in the E. coli. So now we've consolidated processing in these massive facilities, terrible to the animals. When they do a food recall, they have to recall 30,000 pounds of burger because they ground thousands of cows together. In fact, one study I believe recently found in the average McDonald's hamburger, they found the DNA of over 1,200 cows in a burger. I have a burger. I have grass-fed burger. I might have some tonight, though it's Good Friday. Sorry, I'm just thinking about that. And his name's Jamal. My burgers, all my burgers are named Jamal. My kids in school named him when he was born as a calf. I said, kids, what's his name? They named him Jamal. So I want to know where my food comes from. I want to know that the animal is treated well. I want to know that it's free of antibiotics and that it's free of hormones, which are all about increasing profit. Antibiotics are particularly needed because the animals are raised in such tight confinement that their health deteriorates if you don't help them fight off the disease that otherwise will impact them. We import 90% of our antibiotics from China, not a good dependency. 70% of the antibiotics in this country are used in animals. Perfect petri dish breeding ground for microbes. So my rant has only just started. I will allow you to intercede and help me along.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of comments. I'm trying to keep up with them. Everybody, thanks for being here. We've got 150 live listeners. Bartos says, decades ago, they learned that sodium and sucrose canceled each other out neurologically in the human gut. Think about that, folks. Yeah, okay. It's most serious. I have 1/16 of a tablespoon of shaved metal. Yeah, we're talking about a coming food crisis. Like, it's what you get you're lucky if what they put on the label is what you're getting inside your food, guys. Z Squire says, thank you for telling the truth. That's to you, John, I think.
I'm trying. I wonder what glyphosate does to the microbes in the human gut. How about that?
Right. Like, and so all these people have IBS now, or, there's like syndromes.
They've turned frogs gay with atrazine, which is used in corn production. It's banned in Europe. It very easily runs off of farmlands and into water supplies. It also, here in Vermont, they did studies. They show that male bass start laying eggs. It's from the atrazine, we think. Wow. There could be other environmental factors, but consider that we put 92 million acres approximately a year into corn production, and that almost all of that is sprayed with chemicals. And what that does to our water aquifers, because we in many areas they irrigate by pumping water out of these precious aquifers that are not replenishing at the rate that we are pumping them out. And a large portion of that corn is used to feed livestock, which we don't really need it in the case of cows. They're ruminants. They can eat grass only. So can sheep. Pigs and chickens need they can't live on grass alone. But a lot of that, about 40%, I think, of that corn goes to ethanol production. And that's a boondoggle, because you're not saving the planet with ethanol. Once again, the climate environmental market has been used to sell people gadgets. It's just new pollution in old bottles. And people are waking up to this. And that's what I write about in the book.
Right. It's just new pollutants in a different bottle. And usually somebody's profiting off it, whether it's carbon credits or they're taking the farmland or the farmland. Then there's some play where they're taking the small farmers out, but it benefits the big agribusinesses. So they presented it as some kind of moral, choice or something like we're trying to say, but it's really, there's some kind of economic scam underneath it all, or sub rosa, it seems like.
Let me give you an example that, if it's okay. I'm ranting now. Okay?
No, please go ahead.
So let me rant about so-called solar farms. That in itself is lipstick on a pig, as a farmer would say. All right. Because although that's not fair to say to pigs, pigs are awesome. I've raised a lot of pigs. Pigs are really smart. Pigs are smarter than us, I think. Pigs won't eat Twinkies. We eat Twinkies. The rats won't eat the Twinkies. The flies won't eat the Twinkies. The bacteria won't eat the Twinkies, but they'll put Twinkies in a child's lunchbox. They feed chicken nuggets at our public schools, by the way. It's illegal to feed a whole chicken. But look at the solar farms now. Well, first of all, it's not a farm. You're not producing food. You can't eat solar panels. Most of them are imported from China. They're made with coal through coal-fired plants and silicon. They're a nightmare to dispose of. But you know what's happening with the solar panels that they are putting up in the Midwest in particular? They get tax credits for them. They make a lot of money on them. So hedge funds and solar panel developers are outbidding farmers for their land to put in these huge solar arrays. It's driving up the farmland prices for food production, and it's pushing land out of production. And then they put out pictures to try to counter the truth telling. They put out propaganda showing, for instance, solar panels with sheep under them. Well, we don't have enough sheep in this country to go underneath all of our solar panels. So that's an illusion. And even if we did, they don't need that shade. And then you'll see studies like, studies show that solar panel farms, after they're installed, that the bees and pollinators return and that there is biodiversity. That's right. The solar panels had nothing to do with that. What that was caused by is you stopped spraying it with chemicals, and the bees and the pollinators come back, and the weeds and the diversity of fauna comes back. It has nothing to do with the solar panels. All of this is propaganda for profit. Meanwhile, the farmers are not profiting. They're closing at alarming rates, which puts us more and more dependent. In the last 5 years, we have doubled the amount of processed foods, according to USDA records, from China in particular. And we are still the largest exporter of food in the world. Only now we import more food than we export. I'm not sure how that can be very good for the climate. We get about half of our lamb, and I'm a lamb eater, is imported. And most of that is coming from Australia and New Zealand. How's that for the environment? Raising your food on the other side of the planet. None of this makes sense. It's a short blip in human history. In the future, they'll look back and say that we were the most deluded, distracted by our consumption and our screen time humans that ever walked the face of the earth, and that maybe we deserved our looming plight, which is we're being toxified, but also our entire food system. Look at Iran. Look what's happening. If in fact there were a disruption of like these 1970s style that endured, and the price of gas went to, let's say, $25 a gallon, that is layered in the food supply. And the further away you ship that food, the higher your costs now in transport. The entire food system is an illusion. This modern industrial food system is built on a short-term, in the span of history, benefit of very cheap energy. And we're burning through that energy. Even if we can find more, inflation itself, just simply monetary supply, monetary policy, QE, running the printing presses, could spike huge food inflation just by itself without another puncture. And now all of a sudden everybody's clamoring for food. You have disruption, social unrest. We take one of the most important elements in the hierarchy of needs is food, and we take it for granted at our peril. And that's why I wrote this book, not to terrify people, but to wake them up so we can turn it around and get young people into farming, find policies that favor the small farm and the local farm, diversified farms above monocropping and industrial consolidation. It's no longer get big or get out. It's get in and get small. I just made that up. I think I'm going to use that
That's a
again.
good one. That's a good axiom. It makes more sense. And the quality, like you go back to the quality of like actual real food. I think people are really, I mean, you see these kind of changes in the system where restaurants pop up, real food restaurant. Like they have to, it's stunning that they have to call it real food. It's really crazy that like that's your selling point because so much stuff is fake. I knew a guy who worked for Panda Express, and he said the chicken comes from China, and it literally is written CHIKIN. So it's not real chicken, and he won't eat it. He said that he doesn't even know what it is. So they're like serving these people in fast food restaurants. God knows what you get in a fast food restaurant. So I think people really got to
There are a
watch
lot
out.
of human foods that we will not feed to our chickens. If somebody gives it to us, we'll throw it out rather than,
And they're omnivores too. They'll almost eat anything too, right?
Oh, they'll eat it, but we won't give it to them. We have
some of the
organic
stuff, yeah.
grain. Yeah. Sorry to cut you
Right.
off.
No, it's okay. I mean, there's just so much to talk about. It really is a crisis. And I like you write in your book, like 2 generations ago, they never had any of this. This was all calm. People would be creating their own food in their house or whatever, right? They would always have some additional kind of food source.
Yeah. Even vegetable gardens. It became, for a couple of things happened with vegetable gardens. Again, was it by design? For one thing, when food was a little more expensive and people didn't have as much money and they didn't dine out 3 or 4 or 5 times a week, you grew food in your backyard because you wanted it fresh and you saved money. As food became so cheap, and then you go out and gardening's hard work. Not only the weeding, not only all the maintenance, but pests come in and wipe out your squash in a day. Wipe out your potato crop with potato bees. And they go, why bother? It's hard work. And so we've lost that knowledge. We've taken a lot of our backyards and sprayed them with lawn fertilizers and Roundup, with 181,000 people now having filed suit claiming they have non-Hodgkin lymphoma from Roundup. I don't think they're all lying. A lot of that land, your backyard in a suburban area, may be so tainted with fertilizers and weed killers that you wouldn't want to grow vegetables in it, and it can actually inhibit their growth and kill the microbes that actually ultimately are what feed plants. So this is true of our farmers. If we're going to lose half of our farmers in the next 15 years, we're not just risking losing that land to foreign investors or hedge funds or development or rewilding program, paying people to grow trees on their land in the pursuit of carbon. Well, here's a fact for you. Regeneratively farmed land, that is rotationally grazed or mob grazed land by cows, will sequester far more carbon dioxide than a forest. And the forest burns down or is harvested. The soil stays. The bison built the plains. And we are desertifying, turning our farmland into desert. So then you have to put more and more fertilizer, more and more applications every year to maintain yields because more and more is running off. And the soil doesn't hold as much water. So you have to irrigate more heavily, and you have, again, more runoff into the Mississippi Delta. Some studies, it varies depending on soil type and farming type and weather patterns, but we lose, it's estimated, about 4 tons of topsoil per acre of corn production per year. So that's 92 million acres times 4 tons every year flowing down the river. Well, how long is that going to be sustained for? Industrial farming is already in its death throes. We're being told that we have to double down and use that as the sole metric for food production to save us from carbon dioxide. People laugh about saying cow farts are causing problems, and yet they keep plugging the same stuff, and they're trying to control every aspect of your food supply. I can grow grass. I can grow cows right from the grass to my freezer. I don't need any corporate inputs. I don't need their chemicals. I don't need their grain, and they don't like that, because I'm not dependent on them. They're not profiting from me. So they're trying to intrude themselves between me and my cows, between you as consumers, diners, humans. Consumer itself is a sort of diminutive term. It's a reductionist term. It reduces us down to so that we're just more cows in the CAFOs. So at any rate, yes, they do. Clover is nitrogen fixing. Clover and other nitrogen fixing plants literally draw the nitrogen out of the air, feed it down to the roots, and then release it to the microbes, which then feed it back to the plants. That's God's pattern. We're getting in the middle of that once again for profit. So what do we value? And that's how young people, I think, are going to be enticed back to the land, is not measuring everything by the dollar anymore. Measure it in fresh air, measure it in joy, measure it in child rearing, measure it in health, measure it in self-reliance, in survival. And my cows keep me balanced. They keep me, because they live in the now. They chew their cud. I could be all stressed out about, some issue of du jour. And I go out with my cows, and I keep physically, I have to exercise. I got to go to the cow gym every day. Got to move the hay. They have 4 stomachs. They masticate. Then they give me manure, which feeds the soil. I got really I'm very manure rich. I'm just kind of cash poor when it comes to farming.
One of the interesting things is you and the guest before you, they both talked about growing up in farms, and she went to Montana and the joy and peace, and like that was what she looked forward to, was getting back to the earth and nature. And it was like, it just rings a bell, like it rhymes with your book too, is that these are like pleasurable things. Like you're out of the city, you literally own property, you're living off the property, and it's just like a safe, nice place. Like it reminds me, I mean, that you have this quote from C.S. Lewis talking about Tolkien and people's connection to the terrain, and you're 10th generation American or something like that.
I'm Sabbath, though. Some of my
Sorry.
family are Abenaki, so maybe we've been here time immemorial. But
Right.
it
Well,
doesn't matter. It doesn't
there's a
matter.
lot of natives. There's a lot of indigenous people around. My kids are indigenous, partially indigenous through their grandmothers, but the point is like we need to get back to the land and get away from this corporate. The other thing is like they'll die on the vine if you make your own food too, which they don't want. So they want you dependent or control, I think, is really it. And part of that control is
Well,
psychological. It's like part of the propaganda. You go look at how easy it is to go to the fast food place and get your. I know that there's like urban kids whose whole lives are on dollar menus, and that's why they're all fat, is they're eating this horrible processed food.
and more than they're sickly,
Yeah.
many ways. And again, maybe linked to autism, which some studies are linking autism to weakness of the microbiome. If that's the link, and Alzheimer's. Gee, do we care? Oh, it tastes good. Immediate
Right.
gratification. I do want to clarify something here, because I think you were talking about your last guest being Sina McCullough. Sina McCullough,
Well,
who's
she was just one today. She was a homicide detective from Chicago, but she spent all her summers in Montana.
oh, gotcha. Okay. Um,
But Cena
we
McCall was
don't
on my show a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and so Sina actually also has a health story like mine, where food became integral to her recovery. It's food, it's health prevention. It's what we're doing in the Maha movement. We want to show that healthy food is curative and it's preventive. And our entire allopathic health system is built on responding to illness because it's profitable. We pay doctors to prescribe things. And we maybe need to train doctors more about nutrition. Certainly with fibromyalgia, I've found exercise and not being overweight are really, really important for me to reduce pain, right? If I put weight on and I don't move, everything starts to atrophy. But what I wanted to point out about your guest and about Montana, and it's idyllic. It's also hard work. You also watch things die. You also have to slaughter your own animals like I do. You don't have to, but you're involved in it one way or the other. And you get attached to them, and you should. And when you do that, then you have more reverence for the animal. You're less likely to waste food. You have humility and gratitude. That's what's lacking in the drive-through. But not everybody can go live in the idyllic country. That's why people move to the cities, and that was partly by design. But it's the hard work. It's the best thing you could do to raise your kids. They grow up with hard work for no money every day, and then they go get a job somewhere when they're 18. I'm like, you kidding? I get weekends off and I get paid, and I don't have to work till 10 p.m. putting the hay in the barn, and I don't have to deal with sickness and mastitis and death and coyotes coming in and killing all my chickens or my lambs. There's adversity in it, and that's what life is. Soft times make soft men. Farming makes tough men, grateful men. But what I'm saying is, even if you're in the city, don't feel like, well, that's like, Elon Musk going to Mars. I'm never getting on that ship. I can't go live in the country. Well, you can potentially. We're trying to change policies and increase opportunities, but first you have to have the will, and then you have to have more people want to do that. And a lot of young people can do that. And then other young people that live in the cities and make money, well, they're willing to spend their money where they can, and we should procure more federal money for healthy food. We spend like $1.40 a day for public school lunches, meals, and then wonder why the kids are sick. We should spend more money, put our money where our mouth is. And so the people that have the wealth should be willing to pay a premium for farmers that are doing that arduous work. And so it's not really an either or, and you're not trapped in the city. You can have rooftop gardens. You can have, community gardens. You can have a plan, but being aware is the first step, because otherwise we resign ourselves. And if you resign yourself, then you go, oh, well, Nothing I can do. I can't figure out what's on the label. They lie to me anyway. So give me some more Cheetos and some Pringles. Pringles are only 40% potato, by the way. What's the other 60%? Go read. Get educated. Caveat emptor. The tobacco industry bought up your food supplies. It's an adversarial system when you walk into the grocery store or the restaurant. Start fighting for yourself.
Amen. You also provide resources in your book too at the end of the book, so people can actually read the book, get informed, and then go on to other research, right?
Yeah, Beyond Labels is a good one. If you're going to pick one, it's co-written by Sina McCullough and Joel Salatin, our mutual friend. And it literally is kind of a workbook to help you discern what's on a label, because they count on confusing you, so you give up. Oh, it says it's grass-fed. Maybe it was grass-fed for 3 days. Oh, they said they're free range. Okay, they're free range. They have an extra 2 square inches. What are they being fed? Free range isn't organic. Oh, it says non-GMO. Well, is that organic? Oh, it says organic USDA. Oh, it's still tainted because it was imported. 40% of USDA organic is imported.
It says natural. It says natural right there.
So when it says natural ingredients and it contains, look at the food dyes, made from petroleum products, so it's terrifying. And yet we can't put our heads in the stand. We have to fight back. And the first way you fight back before you take action is you get informed. And that's why I wrote this book. I didn't write this book so I could have an ego trip or make money. I wrote this book to equip people so they could make decisions, not just in their purchasing of food decisions, but in their lifestyle, and ultimately in demanding of politicians and agencies that are captured by these companies accountability and changing policies to restore our soils and our water supplies and our farms and our rural communities so that people can move into them. Right?
Amen. I mean, it's really important, guys. We're there. I mean, the food quality has never been as bad as it is now, never been as poisonous, tainted, manipulated in our whole history of the United States. There's no question about it.
Of the world.
In the world. Thanks for all the great comments, everybody. We had over 200 live listeners, so thanks, everybody. I'm trying to keep up with all the comments, but
sorry, I ruined it. We have to do it again. Let's do it.
That's fine. Yeah, anytime. Come back anytime. It is Friday in the afternoon, but is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed before we wrap it up? We're at the 52-minute mark.
Well, I do want to apologize, but I had a hard time multitasking by reading the comments and talking at the same time. But please reach out. Join my Substack. It's free. I do welcome paid subscribers. It's Small Farm Republic. I write for a lot of different platforms. I have some articles coming out with Mother Earth News, but I reprint most of my stuff there at Small Farm Republic. I do it so people will share it. And the book is coming out. It's on Amazon. Advance orders are very helpful so we can get the algorithms going so more people will read this book. It's not the fiat currency that counts. It's the currency of ideas. So if you can help me by supporting this book or telling others or buying it for someone that you think maybe is being thick-headed, maybe a Republican, because I'm a Republican, who says, oh, it doesn't matter. Everything's got chemicals in it. And then they end up with cancer. They're kind of like the cigarette smoker that goes, oh, that's all a lie. Cigarettes are fine. And they're puffing their way through their oxygen tent with one lung at age 62. We owe it to our children, our neighbors, and everyone else to arm ourselves with information against this really deliberate effort to control and profit off us. And they don't care about our health. So we need to care about our health. So I'm very grateful for you having me and for everybody here listening.
I'm grateful as well. Thank you for sharing all your excellent information. You can follow up with the comments. You can see them on YouTube. So people also, you can follow up with John on his Substack, which I will put a link to it. And the book is out next week in a variety of different formats on Amazon. You can get an audiobook, Kindle, and hardcover. And again, the full title of the book is The Coming Food Crisis, How Corporations, Activists, and Climate Alarmists Are Waging War on Farmers. And again, the author's John Klar, Klar. John, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Stay there. Okay.